Well, good morning and welcome to The Orchard Online. I'm glad you are dropping in to check us out, or maybe you say, hey, I'm not checking you out. I'm part of The Orchard. I just couldn't be there this week. Whatever the case, we are glad that you're here. This week, we're going to be wrapping up our series that's about marriage called Meet Me at the Altar. You're going to get to meet one more of our couples, and then we're going to end with a message I think that is so important, but maybe not talked about as much as it should be. Let me just say this. If this is your first time and you are checking us out, I want you to keep in mind that what you see online is not a full church service at the Orchard. It's really just a snapshot of who we are. I think that if you enjoy what you see here online, that you're going to love the experience in person. In person, we have activities for kids, we have a cafe, we've got a location pastor who is ready to meet you and help you know how you can get plugged into a wonderful community here at our church. Well, for right now, we're going to hop into this week's message.
Hi, my name is Jesse Schrock, and I have been married for 4 years.
Hi, I'm Erin Schrock, and I have been married for a little over 4 years.
Funny story, I met Erin actually here at the Orchard. My sister was working here temporarily, and she thought that Erin and I would be a good match, so she tried to set us up.
So we met through his sister. Shout out to Kelly. She actually had been coming to the Orchard for about a year. You know, as getting to know me, she started telling me, asking me what, my type was and everything. And then one day she was like, oh my gosh, you should meet my brother. And immediately in my head, I'm like, no. Like, how do I get out of this? But anyways, she ended up showing me a picture of Jesse. And I was like, oh, okay, he's cute. Doesn't he live in California?
And I lived in California, so we both thought there was no chance, basically. Then I came here for a Christmas break for a family get-together vacation here in Florida. And she managed to introduce us at church at the Orchard at the skating rink. And it was in front of my family and my kid, and it was super embarrassing.
And so it didn't look like there for a second we were going to get to meet. But then it did work out, and we actually met one Sunday at the Orchard for all of about 10 minutes.
The wedding day was great. It was pretty chill because it was just the two of us. We eloped in the mountains in Tennessee, which is where we love to spend a lot of our time. So, just really relaxed and focused on us, which I think, should be the intent of the day. And then we finished it off by warming up some of her mom's homemade enchiladas. So it was a good time.
So when Jesse and I got engaged, and it was during COVID, everything was crazy. We both knew we didn't want a big wedding. We didn't want to do all of that. So we had a planned elopement, just the two of us. It was great. It was just the two of us. It very much put a lot of emphasis on it was us. This is our marriage. And it was just the two of us.
I think we co-parent, not co-parent, but we share the responsibility pretty well. I just back her up when needed, but we don't really need to because our kids are so easy. Both Aiden and Lincoln, they don't really require parenting. They're pretty self-sufficient, and they don't get into trouble. So that makes it really easy.
I think Jesse is incredible dad, and he is a wonderful stepfather. He has stepped up and loved on my child like he was his, and I will forever I'm gonna get checked up. I will forever be grateful for Jesse and the man that he is and the example he is to my son, our son. Sometimes I feel like we fail horribly at parenting, and then our kids do something and we're like, oh, there we go. Okay, we're doing all right. But overall, Jesse is an incredible man. He is an incredible father and a wonderful stepdad.
She's my best friend. Pretty much, so I feel like sums it up. But we're basically the same person. Female, male version of the same person. So the way she's thinking, I'm already thinking that way. So when we're trying to make a decision or anything like that, it's always the same outcome. She is an amazing caretaker.
When I met Jesse, it's going to sound silly, but I had a list in my Bible of some non-negotiables. and I'm not talking silly things about like his appearance or anything like that, but like moral non-negotiables for me that I was just insistent on in, my future husband. And I kept that list in my Bible, and every once in a while when I thought about it, I would pull it out and kind of just pray over it. And it became very apparent to me that he literally checked every single non-negotiable on my list. And he's actually more than I think I could have even thought to pray for. He is my absolute best friend. He is the person that I want to spend all my time with. He is kind and hardworking and thoughtful and compassionate. And yeah, he's just my best friend. I have done life without him, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I do not want to ever do life without him again. Jesse, I am
Aaron,
so glad you met me at the altar.
Well, I'm glad you are back to round out this series. It's been a good series, I think, and so far we really focused on the main idea that healthy marriages are selfless, not selfish. And I know that is simple and straightforward, but man, is it true, and it's powerful when we understand it, that the point of our marriages is not to have our needs and our desires and our wants met, but that we might learn how to be selfless people and to love our spouse in the way that Jesus has loved us. And that's really where the idea of the marriage altar comes in. The marriage altar is not just a place that we decorate with flowers or candles, but it's a place that we come to sacrifice ourselves, to sacrifice those things that we think we want most and learn how to live selflessly. And then last week in particular, we look specifically at what a selfless marriage looks like. And that is how, is seen in how the husband and wife treat each other. And the two words that Paul used in Ephesians 5 were love and respect. That husbands were to love their wives just like Christ loved the church. And that wives are to respect their husbands just like they would Jesus. And so it's an interesting discussion. If you didn't watch it, go back, because Paul really lays out for us, this is what a selfless marriage looks like, looking out for the other more than we look out for ourselves. That's what a healthy marriage looks like. Selfless, not selfish. But then I think there's a question maybe underneath all of that we need to ask, right? If we're talking about healthy marriages, maybe the question we need to ask is, why is it so important that our marriages are healthy? Like, why is that something that we should even want? Well, first, because a healthy marriage is a better marriage. I hope you know that. I hope that just makes sense. But if you have a self-destructive, selfish, toxic marriage, it's not going to be good for either party in the long run. Healthy marriages are successful. They are better. But I think there's a second thing at play here that maybe we don't talk about as often, we don't think about as often, but it's important that we have a healthy marriage because your marriage is a picture of the gospel. Let's say that one more time. Your marriage is a picture of the gospel. Let's look back to Ephesians chapter 5. We've been reading this passage over the last 3 weeks, and we're going to go back to those 3 verses that we read last week. Ephesians 5, 31 through 33. Paul writes this. He says, "For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This mystery is profound, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. To sum up, each of you is to love his wife as himself, and the wife is to respect her husband." So we saw that last week. It talks about two people becoming one flesh. It talks about love and respect. But specifically, verse 32 is what I want us to drill down on today. In verse 32, Paul makes this statement that just maybe seems like a connecting statement to make the other two flow together. But I think there's something important here. He says, this mystery is profound, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. So here, Paul is doing some layered writing. When he says this mystery, right, this mystery is profound, He's obviously referring to the quote about two becoming one flesh in verse 31. And that quote is a quote from the Old Testament. It's a quote straight from Genesis, but it's also a quote straight from Jesus, because Jesus himself used this quote to describe what marriage is. And so his point is that this marriage, two people becoming one flesh, that it's a picture of the one true marriage between Jesus and his bride, the church. He says this mystery of marriage, right, is about Jesus and his bride, the church. And then to double down on that point, Paul makes sure to specifically use the word mystery. If you read the letter that Paul wrote to the church at Ephesus, our book of Ephesians, Paul uses this word mystery 6 times. 6 times in 6 chapters of this one letter to refer to the gospel of our salvation. That's what he uses the word mystery to talk about. Our salvation, the fact that we are made new creations in Jesus. And the last time he uses it is in chapter 6, verse 19. And specifically there, he says the mystery of the gospel. And so that word mystery, Paul uses to talk about marriage, two people becoming one flesh, but then he's also used it to talk about the gospel. So the point is abundantly clear, right? We can't miss it, that marriage, every marriage, all of our marriages from Adam and Eve to today, marriage is meant to be a picture of Jesus's relationship with the church. It's a picture that helps us to see and understand the gospel. So why do we want our marriages to be healthy? Because our marriages are a picture of the gospel. So then, I think maybe the question we have to ask is, all right, well, if our marriage is a picture of the gospel, how is marriage a picture of the gospel? Like, how does it help us to see those things? And I think maybe to understand that, we need to look at another verse to make sure that we clearly understand the gospel. If you got your Bibles, go with me to Romans chapter 5, verse 8. In Romans chapter 5, verse 8, Paul writes this. He says, "But God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." So that is a simple, clear, short, straightforward verse that shows us what Jesus did for us. It summarizes the gospel. God proves his own love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. But I think that verse doesn't just show us some key pictures of who Jesus is and what he's done. It helps us understand how marriage reflects that as well. But let's just break it down into the 2 parts, right? The first part, Paul says, God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners. I think what we see here is unconditional love put into action. It says that God shows us his love in that he does something for us because while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And it's that while we were still sinners part that shows the unconditional nature of God's love. God didn't wait for us to get everything together, to get our life on track. He didn't wait for us to be lovely, but he loved us because he was loving. That's a picture of the gospel, right? That this is the unconditional love of God, not just talk about or sung about, but put into action because God showed us this love. But then he says it is that he did it by showing it to us because Christ died for us. This is the commitment and sacrifice of one's life. Christ loved us so much that he gave himself for us. He gave his very life for us. He took it to the end. He died for us. And I think those 2 pieces of this verse, unconditional love put into action, and the commitment and sacrifice of one's life, that is a picture of what marriage should look like as well. When we are married, we don't just love our spouse on their wedding day because they look nice and they're pretty and it's such an amazing day. No, we love our spouse on their worst day, when they're sick and in bed and have dried snot on their cheek. We love them because we love them unconditionally, not because they are lovely, but because we are called to be loving. And then it's not just words that we talk about, but we put that love into action. It's not just saying I love you as they walk out of the door, but it's doing the little things so that they know they are loved. It is love clothed in action. And then on that deeper level, it really is the commitment and sacrifice of our life for each other. Marriage is for life, and it is about the giving of our life, that we are committing ourselves wholly and fully to that other person. And so when we see those things in the gospel and we see those things in marriage, we see how marriage really is that picture of the gospel. When we look at a relationship and see that type of love, that type of commitment between two people, it helps us to tangibly see and better understand what Jesus has done for us. And I hope that makes sense. And if it does, then maybe the next question would be, okay, well then, who is that marriage? Who is that picture for? If marriage is a picture of the gospel, who is marriage's picture of the gospel to, right? In my mind, I think that our marriage is primarily a picture of the gospel to a few people in particular. Number one, it's a picture of the gospel to our friends and family. Those who know us, those who see us, those who know us beyond just our social media accounts. And I think this is especially true for those friends and family who don't know Jesus. We have a chance to reflect the type of love that Jesus has for them in our relationship with our spouse. And I believe that when we have this type of love in our marriage, when we live this type of way selflessly and sacrificially in our marriages, then it really does help people to see Jesus. And maybe that's the most of Jesus that some of your friends and family are ever going to see. But not only is marriage a picture to our friends and family, our marriage is a picture of the gospel to our kids, right? Our kids learn about what unconditional love and what sacrifice and commitment looks like because they see our relationship with each other. I think that's why it's so important that kids are never at the center of your family, but that marriage is at the center of your family. Because one day your kids are going to leave, they're going to go out on their own, they're going to be adults. Your kids are going to be adults longer than they're going to be kids. But that marriage remains. I think obviously our marriage is a picture of the gospel to our spouse, right? We get the chance to show the love of Jesus to them by treating them how we know Jesus has treated us, not treating them how they may or may not deserve in that moment, not treating them based off of our reactions or our emotions in the moment, but treating them based off of Jesus's unconditional love for us. And then, maybe most of all, marriage is a picture of the gospel to ourselves. As we look at our marriage and in those moments where our spouse really steps up and exemplifies the love of Christ to us, we get reminded, wow, I'm not just loved this way by that person, but I'm loved this way by Jesus. And so really, in all of those areas, we get to see that marriage is a picture of the gospel that helps our friends and family, our kids, our spouse, ourselves see more of who Jesus is and how he loves each one of us. So again, I hope you understand. This is why marriage is such a big deal to us. This is why we want to talk about marriage so much. Is because not only do we want you to have a healthy marriage, a fulfilling marriage, we want you to have a happy marriage, but we want your marriage to really be healthy because we know that your marriage is a picture of the gospel. Your marriage is a picture of the gospel, but is it a good picture? Right? Like, have you ever had your kid come home and draw a picture and you'd be like, oh, wow, that's an amazing dinosaur. And they're like, but Dad, it's a bird, And you're thinking, well, that wasn't a very good picture of a bird. It looked a whole lot like a T-Rex, I thought. Sometimes I wonder if that's not how our marriages are when it comes to reflecting Jesus and his love for the church. Like, sure, they're a picture. They're a picture whether you want it to be or not. We don't get a choice whether or not our marriage is a picture of the gospel, the only choice is how good of a picture are we going to make it? Is it going to look like something that's really incomprehensible? We don't know what it's a picture of because the picture is so messed up and marred, it looks like a finger painting from a kindergartner? Or are we going to work to have a selfless and healthy marriage that is a picture of the gospel painted delicately by the hand of the master? Like, are we in our marriage really reflecting what we say we believe? Are we really reflecting the things that we sing about and talk about and read about and teach about? And if we are, then how well are we reflecting it? And I don't know about you, but for me, that sits kind of heavy, because it's not that I get a choice whether or not my marriage is a picture of the gospel. It is. I just have to ask, how good of a picture is it? Is it a good picture? And so my hope and my prayer is that learning to be selfless, that you would be able to make your marriage a better picture of Jesus' relationship to his bride, the church. And in so doing, that your marriage would become healthy and fulfilling, and that it would be impactful on the eternity of a lost and dying world. I hope this series has been a kickstarter for that conversation, but if you'd like to lean more into that conversation and say, hey, I want to have a healthier marriage that is a better picture of the gospel, reach out to us. We would love to talk with you and walk you through that to help it become a reality in your life. But for right now, let me pray for you. Jesus, I'm thankful for the time that we've had to look at marriage, and I pray that you would help us to lean into our marriage in such a way that it would be a beautiful and clear picture of the gospel, that you would teach each one of us how to live selflessly and sacrificially, laying down our desires on the altar of marriage so that we can better reflect your unconditional and sacrificial love. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Hey, let me just say one more time, I'm really glad that you joined us online today, whether you were just catching up, staying caught up, or checking us out for the first time. I'd really love for you to come be with us in person next week if you can, at any one of our locations, Lake City, Live Oak, or Brantford. We would love to have you come and be in the room with us. But if not, we'll be right back here next week for the Orchard Online.